Hello, everyone. Good evening to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Omid Miri. I'm the chair of the committee. Just before we start, a few housekeeping points. So the fire exit is towards the back in the lift lobby, and there are no fire alarm tests scheduled for tonight, and the toilets are in the same place. I'll now move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence, and we do have some apologies from Councillor Adrian Pascu-Tobore. Moving on to item 2, declaration of interests. I believe Councillor Harcourt has a declaration.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wish to declare an interest in item number 6, which is a consultation from OPDC. I sit on the OPDC Planning Committee, so I shall stay here because it's important I hear what this borough's opinion is, but I shall not participate or vote.
Okay, excellent. Yep. Any others, Councillor Carmel?
Whilst not strictly a disclosable interest, I would just like to point out that for many decades, my family home was 8 doors down from number 70 Lily Road. But I moved from there over a decade ago, so it is no longer an interest, but in the interests of openness and transparency, I just wished the committee to be aware. And I know Councillor Harcourt knows well where I lived. You were actually after my stepfather.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, both. Okay, that brings us to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 18th of April 2023. Are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed? Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Just on a point of information, we deferred an item at the last time we met, and we cancelled the last meeting as well. I was just wondering what the delay was in bringing the item back to committee.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I did raise this with officers. I think discussions are ongoing, so it's not ready to come back to committee yet, but I can open that up to officers if they'd like to clarify on, I believe you're referring to the Shamland application. Yeah, if officers would like to clarify.
Sorry, Chair, I don't have any up-to-date information on that, and Neil would be the one who's not here, but I can arrange for Neil to give you a heads up if you want.
Next meeting's fine.
Okay, thank you. So are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed? Okay, so that can be noted, please. Thank you. And coming on to item 5. So item 5 has been withdrawn from this meeting, from the agenda, so that further information can be provided by the applicant. And that further information is in connection with clarification on access arrangements, particularly by emergency vehicles. So if that is okay with everyone and there are no questions or comments on that, then I will move on to item 4, which is 70 to 80 Lily Road. And can the presenting officer, Tom Scriven, please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The application site relates to a community hall and former nursery building on the north side of Lily Road. On the opposite side of Lily Road from the site is Beaufort Court, a 6-storey residential development. To the north is Lerry Close and Thaxton Road, which consist of 2-storey terraced residential properties. To the east is a Grade 2 listed terrace at number 62 to 68 Lily Road. And to the west are a mix of 2- and 4-storey buildings with commercial units at ground floor level as you move towards North End Road. The site has good public transport links, being in close proximity to West Brompton railway station to the east. There's also a number of bus stops within close proximity of the site serving various routes. The site does fall within the Fulham regeneration area and is in flood zone 3 in an area benefiting from flood defences. It's not within a conservation area. However, as I've just set out, it is in close proximity to other heritage assets such as the Grade 2 listed terrace, and there's also locally listed terrace just beyond that as well. In terms of on-site constraints, there's a number of trees and there's also an existing pedestrian access through the site. In terms of the proposal itself, it's a council-owned site and the proposal is a direct delivery scheme. The application is for the redevelopment of the site to provide a 4- to 5-storey building containing 42 residential units, along with the provision of a community centre, 50% of the residential units would be provided as affordable housing. The proposal also includes 5 blue badge car parking spaces, cycle parking, hard and soft landscaping, play space, and the replacement of an existing substation. Just turning to the existing site plan, this shows the current layout on site. You can see the community hall on the left-hand side of this plan and the nursery on the right-hand side, with the footpath that I mentioned coming through along the west side of the site. In terms of the proposal, the proposed building is located reasonably centrally within the site. You can see that it's set back away from all boundaries and would follow a similar forward building line to the existing buildings to the east. The diverted right-of-way can be seen to the west side of the site. So it's in a relatively similar location, but slightly altered route through the site. And the new substation is down here in the southwest corner. And the parking area and the cycle storage is towards the rear of the site. Ground floor plan just shows a bit more detail on the layout, and in particular, the re-provided community use can be seen in purple to the west side of the building, with access from a public square, which is served by the relocated footpath to the west of the site. The main access to the residential part of the development is towards the middle of the building, centrally within the front elevation, and this serves 2 separate stair cores, which serve essentially either side of the building. In terms of the overall massing, the main frontage of the building is 4 stories, with a 5th story which is set back from the front and rear elevations. To either side are 4-story elements, which again are set back from the front elevation. And this eastern 4-story element also includes a setback from the rear. You'll be able to see this in more detail on some of the following plans. These are the 2D front and rear elevation drawings. So we've got the front elevation at the top and the rear elevation below. Side elevations, here you can clearly see that element I was just talking about on the eastern end, where it has a setback at 4th floor level from both the front and the rear elevations. And you can also see how the 5th story is set back again from the front and rear. This section drawing just helps to show the relationship with the neighbours. So we've got the neighbours at the back on Thaxton Road, and then the buildings on the opposite side of Lily Road. In terms of visualizations, this is the western end of the building when viewed from Lily Road. The community centre can be seen here at ground floor level, finished in an alternative material within that setback element of the building. This visualization just shows the building from the rear, from Lerry Close, again with the community use on the right-hand side here. This visualization is again the view from Lily Road, but this time from the east side of the site. So you've got the listed terrace on the right-hand side here. And then this is from the opposite end, so from the west of the site, again with the community centre in the foreground towards the front. Just going to go through some verified views now, which give you a good impression of what's on site at the moment as well. So this is the existing situation. You can see the single-storey buildings here. And again, this is from the east of the site, again, sorry, with the listed building in the foreground. And then this is the proposed verified view. So you can see the relationship between the proposed building and the listed building. This is the verified view existing, looking east from the west of the site. So we've got the 4-storey buildings in the foreground on the north side of Lily Road, and then 5 to 6-storey buildings on the south side. And then the proposed, you can see how it relates to the buildings within the immediate vicinity. This is the view from Thaxton Road from the rear. So we've got the residential properties on Lerry Close and the ones on Thaxton Road closest to the development site. And then that's the proposed with the building behind those residential properties. Just to quickly go through the floor plans. So the 1-bed units here are in yellow, the 2-bed units in orange, and 3-bed units in darker orange. So that was the first floor. Second floor plan essentially replicates this. At 3rd floor level, you do get a slight difference because you've got the setback on the right-hand side with that slightly smaller element to the east of the building. And then at fourth floor level, again, you can see that where the building's set in significantly, especially from the main side elevations and both from the front and rear elevation, you get a slightly different layout at that level. And then in terms of the roof plan, obviously contains the plant, but you can also see there's an extensive amount of solar panels at that level. And just, sorry, I just got that. Just to summarise, the principal development is considered to be acceptable as the proposal would re-provide a community use on site, make efficient use of the site to provide additional housing and make an important contribution towards affordable housing in the area. Again, particular attention has been paid to the sustainability and energy efficiency of the scheme in line with council priorities regarding the climate emergency. The design and appearance of the proposal is considered to be acceptable with regards to the impact on the character of the street scene and the nearby heritage assets. The proposal would provide a suitable standard of amenity for future occupiers, would not result in a significant impact on the amenity of existing residents. The development would be car-free, provide suitable cycle storage and would not adversely impact upon the public highway. And the proposal is also considered to be acceptable in relation to other material considerations. A legal agreement will be necessary in relation to various matters. The heads of terms are listed in paragraph 7.3 on page 62 of the report. There is one update to this, which is set out in the addendum, and that relates to securing M43 wheelchair accessible units within development. Other than that, there's no updates. The recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and the completion of a legal agreement as set out on page 11 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. I believe we have one registered speaker, Stephanie Meisen, who has waived her right to speak. Is that right? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So we will now move on to members' questions to officers. And who would like to start the questioning? Yes, Councillor Schwartz-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the history of the site because I've had questions from residents about this. So the nursery was closed 10 years ago, you say. Was this site part of the sale that happened many years ago now with the previous administration of the whole estates to make it a private housing site? Is that the land that we got back in 2019?
Yeah, it was. It was part of that sale to Capco, which we've then reacquired. So yeah, it was sold some time ago for another development.
Okay, and the nursery was closed during that time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. As they say, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and I know quite a lot about the site. And it was originally, I believe, the Bellamy's meat pie factory, and before that, it jutted the coal yard, which is why all the buildings on the West Kensington estate are named after things to do with the railway, and the tower block immediately behind, which as I'm sure Councillor Schwartz-Verdier knows is called Sharnbrook, is the largest single unsupported railway cutting on the British rail network. But that is beside the point. I am concerned by the huge increase in height next to the statutory grade 2 listed buildings, which the four houses, Hermitage Cottages, were the first four buildings built by Major General Sir John Scott Lilly, after whom the road is named, and he built the bridge at West Brompton as well. They're one of the very few William IV houses in the borough. I wonder, could you tell me what is the current height of the buildings next door as opposed to the proposed height?
Sorry, just bear with me. I do have the existing elevations. I just need to see if that's got the current height on it. I mean, all I was going to say was on these elevations, we've got the height relative to the datum level, but I don't have the ground level in front of me. So I suppose we can compare the difference between the two. So then, yeah, you'll know the difference. At the moment, the existing building's 9 meters above the datum level. And then, sorry, the proposed building is 22 above the datum level.
Which is significantly taller than the listed terrace.
It is taller than the terrace, yeah.
Significantly was.
Sorry, I thought you were referring to the existing buildings on the site. That's that you were asking for the difference.
Yes.
Yeah, but now you're talking to the neighbouring terrace.
Let me
Okay.
rephrase that. The existing buildings on the site are significantly shorter than the listed terrace. My next question is about the loss of community assets. There is in effect, sorry, I thought I turned that off. There is in effect not only a Muga, but the existing residence hall has significant outside amenity space. How much amenity space will be lost to the residents of the West Ken estate and indeed the surrounding area by this proposal?
Well, I think when you look at it, what you refer to as the Muga is part of the nurseries. So that's part of the closed down operation, as I understand it. No? Okay.
It may well be theoretically part of part of the nursery, but the local residents have had access to it for decades.
But okay, so when you're looking at it in planning terms, though, what the lawful use, it was part of the nursery. That was my understanding. And I know there's been meanwhile uses going on there since, such as the community garden and things like that. But ultimately, that's how we're looking at it from a planning perspective. There's still going to be quite a lot of open space provided on site around the edge of the building.
But not accessible to the general public. But I think you'll find.
Councillor Carmel, just did you finish what you wanted to say, Tom? Yeah, if you could just allow them to complete. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Carmel.
He had finished.
Yeah, go ahead.
Waited,
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think you'll find that the terms of the Prescription Act 1832 come into play in that for a period of more than 20 years, local residents nec vi, nec tam, nec precaria had open access to the said area. But how much public amenity space is there currently, and how much will there be that is publicly accessible were this application to be granted? And so therefore, i.e., how much is being lost?
Well, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I think you can see from the two sets of plans, the sort of relative areas of open space. It's indicated that back here, you've got an area of dense vegetation. You've obviously got the open areas to the front, to the west of the site. They will essentially still be there as part of the scheme, but when we go on, you'll be able to see that as I flick across. So you still have quite a large area of public space across to this side. This is all publicly accessible as well to the front. So yes, there is a loss of some of that space, but there is still a significant amount of public open land essentially within the development.
Thank you. I mean, I could go on for about 45 minutes if I wanted to, but I've heard enough. It's not a bad scheme, but were it not for the impact on my former family home and the listed terrace, I would support it. But rather than just go on, I will just rest my laurels there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carmel. Councillor Chabot-Verdier, do you have a question?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I wanted to continue on that actually, to ask you the questions. Currently, the communal garden actually has a lock on it, and there's a code, so it's not open to all. So my understanding is the land that you've got on this map here, which is pretty much what's currently in front of the tenants hall, kind of remains, right? So so what I'm trying to work out is the communal gardens have come up, and actually I don't know whether it's your team or planning or whoever has actually sent residents an information letter with a consultation event, if not at the tennis hall, on Thursday about the future site of the communal garden. So that gets replaced and that gets reused. I'm trying to understand how much weight can we give, that's a lot of questions, how much weight we can give to this in this consideration. The fact the communal garden actually will have a new home and residents won't be deprived of that on your estate.
Yeah, so we're aware that those discussions are taking place and there's consultation with residents and potential funding for re-providing the community gardens. However, that's not to be secured as part of the development. So whilst that may be a positive thing down the line, we shouldn't be taking it into account in the assessment of the current proposal.
And just to understand the fact there's, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, through the chair. Yeah, just to sort of summarise that, but it's obviously a positive thing, but we haven't given it any weight in the assessment of this application because it's not part of it. So this application stands on the assessment and it's acceptable on the balance of the arguments that are summarised in the report. As Tom says, we are aware that discussions are ongoing about the relocation. They're not planning driven. We might be involved if permission is required, but there seems to be an impetus there and there is a desire to re-provide the community garden elsewhere on the estate. More than that, at this point, we can't really comment, just to reaffirm that we didn't give that discussion any weight in our assessment of the case, which is proper.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And for probably the millions of West Kent residents watching at home, the consultation event is on Thursday afternoon behind Ivet Place, I've been told. Again, the land currently, in fact, in front of the tenants hall, sometimes is locked. So there's a lock on it, you can't access it. So in our determination today, and also the land of the communal gardens, which has a lock on that, when I'm making a judgment, should I consider this as public access or restricted access?
Well, I think the way that we've looked at it is, like I said, that those areas were originally part of the nursery use, which was subsequently closed down. And clearly there's been an intention to then use those areas, in a positive way, whilst, obviously discussions go on about how to potentially redevelop a site. So you shouldn't be giving that meanwhile use the weight that you would, and especially given that, like you say, it's a locked area, it's not publicly accessible, so it's not the same.
Go ahead. Sorry, Tom, did you want to carry on?
I think that was it really, that just in terms of how it has been assessed in the report, that we haven't given the weight to those meanwhile uses that aren't necessarily publicly accessible.
I think Councillor Kamel summarised it well at the start. I mean, there was and our vice chair as well, I think, mentioned this. Obviously, there was a sale of the land, which was in the context of a large master plan that was delivering significant amounts of housing, etc. That fell through and the council was successful in acquiring the land back. Now it's part of our own direct delivery scheme, which obviously is of significant importance to us and goes very much towards the sort of the housing targets that we have. So again, without wanting to sort of repeat things, all of these matters are all perfectly valid, but they've all been weighed up in around in the context of what the scheme delivers and the benefits to the council's current priorities. And obviously the residential element that is important. Now for policy compliance, we're also re-providing the community centre. So again, it's difficult to sort of compartmentalize different issues. I think it's a safer way to look at it all in around and understand the kind of nuances of it. And I think hopefully the report does that and explains why on balance we feel it's a good scheme and worthy of support. So, that is a proper judgment that we have to make and the committee needs to make, and hopefully the report is helpful in clarifying how we've arrived at that overall balance.
Sure, thank you. And as you say, goes some way to meeting our affordable housing targets as well as an administration, as a council. Councillor Schwartz-Verdier, did you want to continue? Just to say, actually, more of a comment and a rhetorical question. If there are concerns about the height of the proposed development, I would just say, what is the height of the Emperor State Building? You know, what is the height of Sharnbrook Tower? What is the height of the mansion blocks across the street? And they are all in close proximity to the sort of older buildings to the east of the site as well. So that's more of a comment just to put out there. But Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions, but also really I actually quite like this because I think it's making use of a space certainly that has not been used for many years. And I can remember when I was going through there, the improvement this is going to make is enormous. But having said that, just a couple, and there's a lot of positive stuff, quite apart from just the 42 houses, of which 21 are actually going to be affordable. But I'm not a great one for reading conditions in great detail, unlike some members of this committee, but I'm interested. It talks a lot about air quality and things like that, which my attention was drawn to, and monitoring of PM10 particulate matter. And then it goes on to talk about reducing dust particles, PM10 and PM2.5, but there's no mention of monitoring the 2.5, which are the ones that are more injurious to health. Any reason for that?
So this is in the.
It's condition number 6, 7, 8, etc.
Okay. I mean, these are conditions that are requested by the air quality officer to obviously try and reduce the impact on air quality during the demolition and construction works in relation to the development. I mean, I can ask him if that needs to be added in there in terms of the monitoring. I assume the monitoring will be in the round, looking at everything that they're doing in terms of, you know, mitigation measures and what the outcome is. So I can go back to them to ask whether or not that's something that needs to be updated in terms of the monitoring.
Okay, I mean, it's not going to, you know, alter my opinion on the overall application, but it's just interesting that it mentions what monitoring of one particular matter, not the other. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was this is another one of our schemes that is very, very close, almost there to passive house standards. The reduction of 70-something% carbon is incredible. And, you know, combining that with the 50% affordable housing, I think is a really positive thing. It's a shame, and I don't know whether any work can be done. You know, obviously, I'm not suggesting you go back and try and negotiate this, but just trying to raise that carbon reduction just that little bit more to reach the standard would be really great. I don't know whether anything could be done with that, but as it stands, this is still a very positive move, I think, and helps us with our aim of reaching net carbon zero by 2030. So I think positive all round.
I was just going to say they are also looking to make a payment to offset the remaining carbon emissions. I know that's not necessarily exactly what you want to see, but clearly there's an intent there to do as much as physically possible.
No, I understand that, but as I think I've said here before, I don't particularly like the idea of polluter pays. I appreciate they should pay, but it's not a means of not doing the thing in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No further questions. Okay, so we'll move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on recommendation 1, which is on page 11 of the report. And I will start with Councillor Chabot-Verdier. Will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Souslous. For. Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel.
Not voting.
And I'll also be voting for. So that recommendation has been approved. And we now move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 11. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Souslous.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel. For. And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move on to item 6, which is 5 to 7 Park Royal Road, part of the OPDC area of responsibility. Can the presenting officer, Yayan Bellis, please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. We'll just go through the slides now, but just to reaffirm what we've said in many previous meetings, this is a consultation case. It's not for the council to determine its application. It falls within the remit of the OPDC. So we are effectively confirming to members what we intend to say to the OPDC in response to the formal consultation. The site is actually in Ealing. It's west of North Ealing Station. Have we got a site plan there? Yeah, it's a fair way off that. It's around, effectively around where the scrubs are. So it's further on the right-hand side. Is there an image showing that then?
Yeah, and sorry, could you just speak slightly closer to the mic?
Yeah,
Thank you.
The best you got. Okay. Okay, so the site's in two parcels, split by the road. It's east and west, they refer to it, and you can see North Acton Tube Station there. It's some way away from the borough boundary, which is to the east of that, along the western end of the Wormwood Scrubs open space. It's in the London Borough of Ealing, as I say, and we've been consulted on a scheme which is for redevelopment. The eastern parcel there, which is the right-hand side, the bigger triangle, that's to be redeveloped in the form of a 33-storey building, providing up to 988 student units, with some ancillary facilities, including classrooms, etc., and some light industrial floor space. The western building, which is the smaller of the parcels there, is building B, and that's 15 stories and provides 82 residential units over flexible commercial floor space. In terms of impact on the borough, which is primarily what we're looking at here, given the location, you'll be aware that some of the ones we reported to you are sites within our borough where we are not the planning authority, but nevertheless, you know, have more of a direct impact on our own highways and views. In this case, it's some way away, but we are still obliged to assess the impact, the potential impact of the proposed development on the borough's road network and on views from the borough. So they've submitted some of those, and obviously Alan's here, and he can speak to the key ones from our borough, which is basically St Mary's Cemetery and Wormwood Scrubs. Assessed in the round and assessed against the context of what the OPDC have already approved and what's getting built, we find it difficult to object to the heights of the buildings. That's a contextual analysis, and Alan can explain a bit more about that when we see the images. In terms of the highway issues, again, the distance from the borough's road network and the fact that it's a permit-free scheme, again, make it difficult for us to object in principle in terms of potential impact on our own highways. The residential element, the affordable housing element, is primarily for Ealing and for the OPDC with reference to the London plan. What I will say at this point in time is it's effectively 100% affordable if you look across the piece. So you've got a mix of low cost rent and intermediate on the 82 homes combined. That's 100% of them. And then there's 35% affordable, 190 affordable student rooms as well. So there's a sort of blended calculation they've done. The OPDC will need to look at that in the context of the mayor's fast track mechanism, etc. We're bringing it forward for ratification before we write to the OPDC and give them our views. I think I should point out that the latest from the OPDC is that they are intending to go back to the developer and ask for if they can revisit some of these issues. That's primarily in response to consultation representations they've got from residents in Ealing and groups in Ealing. And it focuses primarily on heights and bulks. So although we're not raising objections ourselves in respect of the heights, any reductions in those and clarification of some of the other matters that they're looking to raise, which is potential interfaces between non-residential and residential on a tight site, and potentially the impact of servicing on the public realm at ground level. These are all things that the OPDC have yet to be satisfied on. So it may well be that they agree to some changes being submitted, in which case they will reconsult us. So we don't lose the opportunity on commenting additionally on those, should that be the case. There's obviously an outside chance as well that they don't reconsult us because of the nature of the changes. And that's another reason why we thought it was politic to bring this forward now. So at least we've registered a position. If we get another chance at it when it's revised, that's grand. But you know, we'll have provided our comments. There's nothing really more to say on this. It's there's no real history on the site. The housing mix again would be something that OPDC and Ealing would need to look at. The combination of low cost rents and intermediate is in principle welcome. I mean, as I say, if you add them together, it's effectively 100% affordable in terms of the 82. But as reflected in the representations from their groups and from the residents, which are summarised on the addendum now, that's the most recent position as of today. There are elements here which are still of concern, and those are also reflected in the GLA Stage 1 report that went direct to Ealing. So it's not done and dusted yet, and it may well be that we need to revisit this at some point in the future. The recommendation as it stands at the moment is that we don't raise objection in terms of the impact of the proposals on Hammersmith and Fulham.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Sort of questions and observations. The first question is, it has very little effect on the borough, but can you just confirm that it's far enough away from the borough that there will be no shadow falling on any part of our borough to midsummer or midwinter or whatever?
Yeah, and sorry, if you could just make sure you have your mic on, if you could just repeat what you just said, please. Thank you.
Yeah, beg your pardon. In this view here, you've got the line wires, which I don't know if you can see them there in orange. That's the contextual sort of situation in terms of consents that have already been granted in that locality, and the impact that the current proposals have seen in that context. Some of those are under construction, others have got planning and have not yet been built. It also gives you a sense of distance in terms of where they are, and obviously in terms of the cumulative impacts. But in terms of direct shadowing, they are far enough away for that not to be an issue.
Thank you. I suspected that would be the case, but I thought it was worth asking to make sure. And even if there was any shadow, it would be on the scrubs anyway.
Yeah, it'd have to be a very big building to have an impact on the scrubs in terms of shadowing. There are obviously view analysis here, and that is correct and proper, and there would be views from the scrubs that would be impacted. The issue is the extent to which that impact would, if you like, worsen what's already been approved there. And the view is that seen in that context and obscured by some of those buildings, it would be difficult for us to make an issue out of this particular scheme.
And thank you. The next question is a general one, and I ought to know the answer to this. And I always make it a case that I never ask a question at planning committee unless I'm fairly sure I know the answer before I ask it. But are there standards for the number of disabled parking spaces that should be provided per unit? Because as I can work out, this is 988 student units, 82 residential units making 1,070, and also C3 space as well. And it's got the same amount of disabled car parking spaces as 70 to 80 Lily Road. There has to be some sort of standard that's in the London Plan, NPPF, or whatever, or the Ealing Development Plan, I know not. But will this adequately meet the needs of 1,070 residential units and the Class C3 units that are being provided? Because it seems 5 for that number of units seems infeasibly small.
Sorry, your mic, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, there are standards, and they're in the London Plan as well, and Ealing will have their own. So it is a matter that they will be looking to address. The blue badge parking is generally provided in association with wheelchair units and disabled spaces. And the way that the mayor works that policy at the moment is that normally it's a 10% requirement, but they don't normally provide a 10% up front. It's all about the demand. And you can apply for blue badge parking separately if you move into a development and you need, you're entitled to blue badge parking. So in this particular case, Ealing or the OPDC rather would need to look at what's been provided up front in the context of potential wheelchair units within. And, if you take the 82 residential units, then you could expect, or there would be a normal requirement for 10% of those to be wheelchair accessible. Yes, I mean, they both fall under the sort of the target of the 35% as far as the London plan is concerned in terms of affordable. And the same requirement would be there in terms of having an appropriate number of student accommodation units, which are capable of being adapted for people with disabilities. That information is not readily available, and the OPDC haven't drafted a report on it yet, so it's difficult to sort of guess how they're going to weigh it up in the rounds. But you're absolutely right; they will have to consider those things, and there is a policy context for that.
Thank you. Just a couple, and there's comments about the disabled parking for the benefit of Councillor Harcourt, who does sit on the planning committee of OPDC. But can you just confirm? I'm sure that they do that. Given the height of the buildings, they'll have twin cores. Yeah,
I mean that is something that was raised early on in the process, and there is a fire strategy, report on the OPDC website, and it does confirm that there are two stair cores in both buildings.
Sorry, Councillor, I've just put the slide on the screen that shows the indicative layout of a typical floor, which shows obviously there's two stair cores for each block.
So just to summarise, and I know we don't have a vote on this, and it's Ealing's problem, not ours, because it's far enough away, that according to the 10% rule, there should be 107 disabled car parking spaces, and they're providing, is it either 4 or 5?
Yeah, did officers want to come in on that, or no?
No, it's difficult without the full kind of facts in front of us, and it'll need to be weighed up and around. But it's not unusual for the Mayor of London to insist that you don't provide the full blue badge parking up front. They normally look to, I think it's 3%, and then you build according to what's coming in. So there will be that flexibility built into it. I mean, the OPDC have got a lot of experience, obviously, in applying the mayor's policies in the context of residential development. So it won't be something that they will be able to swerve, should we say. They'll need to address it. But as I don't have a report and we don't have the kind of details of that assessment to date, it's difficult to say, in the round how that will be weighed up against other obvious elements of the scheme, which they've got concerns about as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No. No further questions? Okay, so we'll move on to voting. And first, there is a vote to vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, that the council raises no objections to the OPDC in relation to this application. That's on page 98 of the report. So, Councillor Chabot-Verdier, were you voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harcourt?
Not voting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Councillor Harvey?
For.
Councillor Toulouse? For. Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel? For. And I'll also be voting for, so that recommendation has been approved. Thank you very much. I think that's our shortest meeting yet. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting. The draft minutes will be published shortly, and they'll be formally approved at the next meeting on the 4th of July. And if you have any questions or queries in the interim, please contact the case officer in the application report.